Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and Gamefound over the next week. If you're new here, we do this every single week going over all the upcoming campaigns, so if you want to stay up to date, this is the place to be. But before I get started, I do like to go over some news and announcements that I just found out about, except I don't really have anything to go over this week. So I'll just get into the usual mentions here and give a quick shout out to Alex over at Boardgame Co. because him and I do work together keeping track of all these upcoming campaigns, and I do this every single week. But Alex puts out a similar video at the start of each month going over the entire month and giving you a bit more of a sneak peek into the future and also focusing more on those heavy hitters. So if you do like these sorts of videos, you'll definitely like his as well. You can find a link to his channel in the description down below. I do also want to give a quick mention to Michael over at Zilla Blitz because he also puts out a video each and every month going over some upcoming games. But what makes his channel special is that he focuses pretty much exclusively on historical war games, which is a genre that both Alex and I just don't dive into in as much detail. And he also follows a few other crowdfunding platforms that offer those types of games. So if you want to get the most comprehensive picture of all the different games launching on all the different platforms, you'll definitely want to subscribe to him as well. But that's all I got for an intro, and we do got quite a few games launching this week. Not as many as last week, thankfully, but there's still quite a bit, and there's a few big ones as well, so let's check them out. And for this first campaign, I thought it was launching last week, but it's actually launching this week on the 24th, so I did already cover this one in last week's video, but this was my pick of the week last week, and I think this one looks like a lot of fun, so I'll go ahead and roll that previous footage for you now. And this one is a competitive game where players are trying to become the most dominant species. And this one is coming from the same publisher that created the games Oceans and Evolution, and this one does share a lot of similarities with those games, so if you are familiar with those, you will see those similarities here. I think this one will be my favorite of the three. I wasn't a huge fan of Oceans, and then Evolutions never really compelled me enough to want to buy it, but after looking into this one, it is one that I am considering. And I'll just go ahead and back that up by saying that this one is my own personal pick of the week. And the reason for that is because this game looks like it offers a lot of depth without a whole lot of complexity. It looks like it does a lot with very few components, and this is a game that offers a lot of variety when it comes to comboing and making you feel like you've made some very clever plays. And another cool aspect of this game is that it is also a modular game. The way that this works is that you'll be able to include any combination of the unique decks in your game in order to create a unique permutation of those decks. I really like this because not only does it offer a ton of variability from game to game, but since you're actually going to be swapping out completely different decks with different themes, each game is actually going to feel very different from each other depending on the decks that you choose. Each of the decks are going to be adding their own set of traits into the game that players are going to be using to evolve their species in various ways, but each of these decks could also introduce mechanisms either by modifying some of the core rules, adding onto those rules with some new ideas like different ways to gather food, or even introducing additional boards or components. But like I said, the goal of this game is to become the most dominant species, and the way that you do that is, of course, by being the player that ate the most at the end of the game. Players could eat vegetation, meat, or both depending on how they evolve their animals, and there will be a shared watering hole that's going to be populated with a certain amount of vegetation each round that players are going to be competing for. Players start the game with just a level 1 species of only one population. You're going to be tracking the level of your species with this token here. Then you're going to be tracking the amount of the population with these different population tokens to the right of it. The game plays over 4 rounds, and at the start of each round, all the players do get to draw 5 more cards into their hand, and you do get to draw those cards from any of the decks that you are including in that game. Players will then take turns playing as many of those cards from their hand as they want to or that they're able to, and there's a few different things that you can do with these cards. You can either play them into your species in order to add those particular abilities and stats and icons to that species, or you can discard cards to either raise the level of your species or increase the population of your species. Just keep in mind for each population token that you're adding, you're going to have to pay for that token with additional food at the end of the round, or else you will lose that population. Any cards that you don't play do carry forward into the following round, so if there is something that you think will be more useful to hang on to for a future turn, you can just choose not to play it and hang on to it for a later time. There's a ton of different trait cards that you'll be able to mix together in different ways as you build up your species, but just keep in mind that each of your species is only allowed to have 3 trait cards. These cards can have all sorts of different abilities that can trigger at different points in the game, but they can also have these different icons which might go hand in hand with those abilities, or they might be used to attack or defend from other animals. This is because you can turn any of your animals into a carnivore as a free action on your turn, and whenever you do that, they're going to be starting to eat meat. One of the ways to get meat in this game is to eat the population of the other animals out on the table, and you are also able to eat your own if no other players have animals that you're able to capture. But in order to determine which of the prey you're able to catch, you're going to be combining your level with each of your predator stats, adding them up to your total strength, and then you'll compare that to each of the other animals' level added with each shell icon that they have within their species display. Any of the species' defense that totals less than your strength is going to be suitable prey for your animal. But players only feed their animals after all the players have played any cards that they want, and then when they do feed their animals, they're going to be going in turn order. As I said, any of the predator species are going to be eating any of the other animals at the table that are weaker than them, and you're going to be doing this for each population token that you have, assuming that there are enough animals there to eat. For the animals that eat plants, your primary source of food is going to be coming from the watering hole, but you're only allowed to take as many as your species level, plus any of the vegetation icons on your cards. But of course, you can only take food up to the amount of populations that you have to feed, and for each one that you are able to feed, you're going to be putting that food token on top of it. Any populations that go unfed will die and will be removed for the following round. And if a population ever gets to 0, either from not being fed or by other animals eating it, then that species will go extinct. Luckily, you do get a new species token each round to start a new species, and there are different actions that allow you to gain these as well, which means that you can have multiple species on the go. I should also mention that at the end of each round, you're going to be taking all the food tokens off of any of the populations that you're able to feed, and then you're just going to be hanging on to those as victory points at the end of the game, and the player who has the most after the 4 rounds is going to be the winner of the game. And if you do want to check this one out, you can find a link to it in the description down below, and of course, click to get notified. Also launching on the 24th, we have The Story of Many, and this one's an open-world narrative cooperative adventure with an emphasis on exploration, storytelling, and challenging combat. This is a game that is quite ambitious. It has hundreds of enemies, different abilities, and items that you can discover, and all the characters are very asymmetrical in this game. What's really neat about this is that you can mix and match all sorts of different races and classes and skills and traits all into your ideal character, and each of these characters will actually have a bunch of different skill trees that you'll be able to navigate whichever way you want as the game progresses. Of course, there's going to be a bunch of different items and weapons and spells and different things that you can find in order to augment your character, and each player is going to have these really nice triple layered boards in order to keep all of that organized. The game also promises a true open world experience where it's going to be up to the players to decide where they want to go and when, and any achievements, clues, or rumors will carry over between the campaigns. The world map is going to be divided into 8 different domains that all have different environments and creatures and mysteries for players to discover, and as you move between these domains, you're going to have to encounter different event cards each time that you make a transition between them. Of course, there's going to be a ton of different settlements and cities for players to discover and explore, and the game offers a few different layers of adventure. There's your main story arc that's going to be progressing you through the campaign, but then there's also the adventures, which are basically optional side quests, and then there are the world adventures, which are longer adventures linked to timed events during the campaign. Then there's also all sorts of hidden locations and mini dungeons that players can spend around 45 to 60 minutes exploring just one of those areas. These dungeons can span all tiers of difficulty and be found at any point during the campaign, and if you're lucky, they might even have some legendary enemies, including some legendary loot. The combat in this game does use dice rolling, as well as this combat board that's broken into 3 different areas, where each area can only ever have 1 main character at a time, and then up to 2 supporting characters. There's also a staging area where you can queue up different enemies, but the battle is essentially going to flow back and forth between the enemy activation phase and the player's activation phase. And there is also the possibility of reacting to different attacks or different triggers factors that happen throughout the battle. But players are going to be rolling dice for both their attack or defense, or possibly for different skill checks. And of course, the different items and gear and potions that you might carry along with you can help you augment all of this dice rolling into your favor or add some other types of effects. There isn't a whole lot more info on this one at the time of me filming this video, but this does look like it's going to be a big one, so if you do want to check it out and if you do want to learn more about the details and how the game actually plays, definitely go ahead and check out the campaign, and I will have that linked down below. Also launch on the 24th, we have Biohazard, and this one is a competitive strategy territory building game where players are going to be fighting back against different pathogens. This is a campaign that I did cover in the past, but it looks like they pulled it down and made a few changes, and they're relaunching it again now. So if you do want to learn more about this one, I'll just go ahead and roll my previous footage. And this is a competitive game that basically combines the mechanisms with Ticket to Ride with the mechanisms from Pandemic. So if you're ever wondering what that might look like, I think this gives you a pretty good idea, because on your turn you're going to be able to use actions to draw cards of different colors into your hand, just like in Ticket to Ride. And then you're going to be combining those cards together in certain combinations in order to place different walls and quarantine zones out on the main map. You'll be able to gain points for each wall of your color that you're able to put out on the map. Then you'll also gain points for completely zoning in certain areas, essentially creating a quarantine zone that the pandemic can't get into. Because in this game there is a global pandemic, and it's going to be showing up on the board and spreading throughout the different adjacent regions. And the way this works is at the end of a player's turn, they're going to be able to choose one of the groups of virus tokens out on the board, and then you're going to be rolling dice, which is going to dictate how that virus spreads. So you'll probably want to pick the groups of virus to spread that are more likely to cause your opponents to lose points rather than yourself. There's also additional victory points at the end of the game to whoever was able to put down the most walls, and then the game ends once all the regions are full of either a virus or a lockdown token. And then the player with the most victory points at that time wins the game. And if you are interested in this one, you can check it out. I'll have it linked down below. Also launch on the 24th, we have Skara Brae and the Anarchy, and this is the next set of games offered from Garfield Games. And both of these are worker placement games, except for the Anarchy is also going to be including a pad of paper because there is a writing component to it. And even though these are both being launched in the same campaign here, they still do play very different from each other, but they both also do look like a lot of fun. They both look like games very different from anything else that I've played, and for that reason, these ones are my own personal pick of the week. And like I said, both of these look really solid, but if I had to choose which one I think I'll like the most, I'd probably go with Skara Brae. It's got some really neat mechanisms that I'd really love to try. And then the Anarchy also has a little bit more going on with it, which is kind of putting its weight higher than my usual preferences, whereas Skara Brae seems like it's more in that sweet spot for me. We'll start with the Anarchy here, and like I said, this one is a worker placement game, but also uses a pad of paper, and players are going to be taking their actions partially through that worker placement and partially through trading in resources in order to take actions on their sheet. The main goal here is to try and build out your kingdom while also protecting it from attacks, and the game offers a bunch of different scenarios with different challenges and different tweaks on the game to give you something a little bit different every time that you play. The game plays over 5 rounds, and like I said, each player is going to have a player sheet, but they're also going to have a board to track the various cards that they'll be collecting throughout the game, and then also a kingdom board where they're going to be keeping track of the defenses of their kingdom. At the start of each round, each player is going to get dealt a number of attack cards equal to the number of the round, which means that the game is going to be ramping up and getting more difficult as the game goes on. Each player is going to be putting those cards above this board here to be dealt with at the end of the round, and each one of these attack cards is going to have certain requirements that you're going to have to meet in order to overcome that attack. The catch here is that only some of these are going to be face up, allowing you to know the type of attacks that are coming, while some of them will be face down, and you're just going to have to do your best and try to mitigate those damages by investing in the different areas that you might need. After that, a number of path cards are going to be drawn equal to the player count, and then players are just going to be taking turns drafting these. These cards are important because they're going to be granting you any of the resources or workers depicted on that card, and then each card also gives you some different opportunities for scoring victory points. And after you've taken your resources, you're just going to be sliding that card under the same board where you put the attack cards, but on the bottom of the board, and you're just going to be sliding them so only the scoring objective is revealed, so that you can keep track of that as the game progresses. At this point, players are going to be spending their resources and workers in order to take whichever actions that they would like, and some of the actions might also require them to draw or play these cards, which can modify the outcome of those actions. Most of these actions do work towards filling the player's attribute track, which is nice to do because each space filled will be worth a victory point at the end of the game, but you can also gain different bonuses just for moving up these tracks. Another thing you can do with your workers and resources is build buildings, and each building is going to be giving you some sort of different benefit, but each of these buildings can also be upgraded often multiple times, improving that building and improving the benefit that it grants you. There's also an area of the board known as the Wealth Wheel, which will help you in various ways when it comes to gaining workers, increasing your production in different ways, or improving your infrastructure and weapons. For example, the quarry, forest, and farms can grant you all sorts of different resources, and then the training grounds can also be built in order to create more soldiers, which will help you with your defense. You can also build all sorts of prepared tactics, which is basically a fancy way to say traps. But of course, the main defenses here is the infrastructure itself, and you're going to be building different gates, towers, walls, and moats. And whenever you spend resources in order to upgrade those, you're going to be either placing or increasing a value of a die on your castle board. The higher value you have there, the more defenses you'll have in that area. But after all the players have performed the actions that they would like, you're going to be coming to the end of the round where each player is going to have to pay food equal to the current round that they're in. And then each of the players' attack cards are going to be resolved, revealing any that were previously face down. Then you're just going to be resolving them from left to right, and these cards are generally going to be depleting your defenses and your infantry. You're going to be gaining bravery and loyalty for any of these cards that you're able to defend against, but depending on how you do overall, you might gain joy that can be worth victory points at the end of the game, or you might earn discontent, which can subtract from your victory points at the end of the game. The game continues like this over the 5 rounds, and the player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game. Skara Brae is a competitive worker placement game that plays over 4 rounds, with you gaining an additional worker with each round that passes. What's really neat about this game is that it also makes use of this resource board, and each player is going to have one of these. And as you're gaining your resources throughout the game, you're going to be putting them into the empty spaces on this board until you don't have any more space to put those resources. Once that happens, you're going to be moving this slider here 1 space to the right to free up more spaces. And then you'll be able to occupy those spaces with more resources. But the catch here is that the more that this slides to the right, the more waste you're going to be creating for that round, because whichever icon is located under the slider, whatever value is on that icon is the amount of waste that you're going to be generating. This is bad because it could cost you victory points at the end of the game. But like I said, the game does play over 4 rounds, with each round granting you another worker that you'll be able to use for the rest of the game. But what's interesting about this is that there's actually 2 different sized workers. The first one you get is going to be your large worker, and all the others are going to be your small workers. And what's special about this is that each of the worker locations can actually have multiple workers on it. But in order to make that happen, it needs to be 1 large worker and 1 small worker. You can't have 2 of the same on the same spot. But also at the start of each round, there's going to be these 3 sets of village cards put out on the table. And each round, each player is going to have 3 turns. And each turn, you're going to be drafting a card from one of these sets. There's 4 different types of village cards offered in this game, with 1 reducing your food requirements each round, 1 gaining your resources, and 1 reducing your waste production. The 4th type is a little bit different because these are your settlers. And these ones are going to be coming with 2 different sets of actions. There's going to be a top action, which is mandatory to do, and then there is the bottom action, which is optional. Each of these settler cards are going to relate to one of the 4 different types of environments, and this is going to be indicated by the icons at the top of the card here. And other cards and actions might multiply depending on how many of those icons you have. You'll be keeping these cards, stacking them by their environment type at the bottom of the board, which will create a little bit of an engine as you're performing those various actions that do multiply off those particular environments. Some of these cards that you're collecting could also come with different rest abilities, which will trigger at the end of the round. After that, the players can place their workers in order to do different things, like collect different resources, or spend those resources in order to cook food, move up their furnace track, clean out waste, or gain other resources. There are also a bunch of other special actions that can be performed as well. And each worker you place should be fully resolved before you place the next one, and once you've placed all your workers, you're going to be taking them all back into your supply. After all the players have done this, you're going to be moving into the end of round phase where you're going to be resolving any of those rest actions, and then each player is going to have to spend a food for each one of the settler cards that they have in their tableau, or if you're not able to do that, or if you choose not to, you can just discard that card. And then each player is going to produce the amount of waste as indicated on that slider. At the end of the 4 rounds, players are going to be adding up their victory points from their cards, their resources, as well as their progress up various tracks. And then the player with the most victory points at that point wins the game. You can find this one linked down below, and of course you can click to get notified. And also launching on the 24th, we have a new expansion for the game Deliverance. And if you're not familiar with this game, this is a cooperative game of heaven versus hell, where players are going to be playing as asymmetrical angels fighting against the devil and his demons. This new expansion is called the Council of the Fallen, and it's going to be introducing an ancient evil as players have uncovered a demon-infested castle that's as old as time. The expansion comes with over a dozen one-off scenarios that players can attempt, but it is going to have its own campaign as well that offers over a dozen different missions. And there's also going to be some new angels that players can play as well as new fallen princes. And this also introduces some tweaks to the original game, offering streamlined rules with simultaneous play, and also an updated solo mode. But for those of you who aren't already familiar with this game, this is a game where players are going to be working together as angel warriors, fighting back against the demons who have taken control over key figures on Earth. The goal of the game is to defeat all the demons, and if you're able to do that, you're going to be freeing the people under Satan's influence and returning them to a path of salvation. This is a game that offers a huge amount of variability because there are a ton of different demons that you can go up against, and every single one of them is unique with their own set of actions. And you can also include a module that's going to allow them to change their behavior and become even more challenging the longer that they remain in play. So if you're playing with that, you're going to want to get rid of them as quickly as possible. Not only that, but there's a whole bunch of different angels that you can play as that each have their own set of stats and strengths and special abilities, and they each come with their own deck of these talent cards that can be randomized and chosen from game to game, making it play very differently even if you do play the same angel over again. These talent cards come in 3 different levels, and you're only going to include 1 from each level, but you don't start with these active right away. Instead, you're going to be unlocking them one by gaining experience either from defeating enemies or from protecting humans. But in order to play the game, you're going to be setting it up with the map tiles for that specific scenario, and you're going to be putting these out on the main board. And there's a few different areas to be aware of here. There is the main map, and then at the bottom here, there's an area to keep track of your various darkness cards. These darkness cards can cause all sorts of negative effects for the players, and you're going to be starting with a few of these inactive face down at the start of the game. But then each time that you end a round and there is a human that is currently corrupted by the demons, for each human that is corrupted, you're going to be adding another darkness card to that row. Once you run out of space to add a new darkness card, instead of adding a card, you're going to be flipping them from left to right, resolving any effects or ongoing effects until you're able to get rid of that card. Things get even more dicey if all the cards are already flipped up, because for each human that's corrupted at the end of the round in that case, every single player is instead going to be losing health. But during the action phase, the turns are going to be alternating between a player and then a demon, and then the next player and then the next demon, until every single player and demon has had a turn. For each of the player's angel, they're going to be spending action tokens in order to perform their various actions, and what's interesting about this is that every angel has a completely different set of actions that they have access to. These can allow the player to move around out on the board, attack demons in different ways, heal themselves or other players, gain prayer cards which can grant special abilities or bonuses, get rid of darkness cards, or even revive other players. After they've performed all their actions, you're then going to be resolving one of the demons, and the way that this works is you're just going to be following the instructions on the board, which usually involves rolling a die and then performing the associated action. You're going to have a bunch of demons to go up against, but once players have defeated all the different types, you're going to be replacing all the existing demons with a new demon plus a fallen prince, and that's going to be setting you up for the final battle. And of course, if you are able to defeat all of them, then you do win the scenario, but it's not going to be easy because those fallen princes are really difficult along with the additional demons that are still included. If you are interested in this one, I think you can have a lot of confidence backing it. Not only did it win a whole ton of awards, but it has a really nice 8.6 on Boardgame Geek, which is a really hard rating to get. And this new version also improves on their original system. So this new rule set should be even better than the original. Definitely check this one out and feel free to follow along, and I'll have a link to the campaign in the description down below. And this next campaign is also launching on the 24th, but this one's actually including 4 different games because this one is the campaign for the Bird series. And the first game that we have here is called Pebbles, and this one is a trick-taking area control game where each player is going to have a hand of cards, and each one of those cards is going to have a different power. On your turn, you can play a card to try and win a trick in order to gain a love token. That's worth a victory point at the end of the game, but you'll also be able to take a few actions as well, because the way that this game works is that the lead player is going to be determining the trump suit, and this is a game where really the trump suit is the only one that matters because you don't have to follow suit if you don't want to, but it's only the highest card of that suit that can win the trick. The reason that you might want to play something other than the lead suit is because you do get to take 2 actions afterwards, and one of those actions is to use the power of your played card, so you might care more about the power than the actual suit of the card. But another action is to place a unit on a space that matches the card that you just played. So if there's a particular space that you want to take control of, that might be another reason to play a different card. But the final action that you could choose to take is to just gain another card. Players will be gaining victory points for the different tokens they collected, as well as controlling those different spaces and territories across those different tiles. And the next game offered in this campaign is called Flock, and in this game, players are going to be dealt a hand of cards, and the remaining cards are going to be going into a draw pile. You're going to have a few of those cards revealed, and once per game, each player is allowed to refresh those revealed cards. But on a player's turn, they'll be able to draw a card from the display or from the deck, and then they'll be able to take 2 actions. The different actions you can perform are to Flock, which allows you to play any set of 2 or more matching birds from your hand into the space in front of you, or instead you can choose to Migrate, which allows you to play 1 card from your hand in front of you, merging it with any of the cards that are already in play. But also, if any other players have matching cards in their display, then they're going to have to give 1 of those cards to you. Final action you can perform is to Roost, which allows you to play a run of 3 birds of the same suit in front of you. And the nice thing about this is that you can take cards from your hand, from the shared display, or from the cards that you already put out on the table. The other nice thing about roosting birds is that these birds cannot be stolen. Players are going to be gaining victory points for their collected cards, and then the player with the most points at the end of the game wins the game. Also in this campaign, we have Birds on Birds, and this one is a dexterity stacking game where each player is going to have their own pool of different bird tokens that they're going to be trying to get rid of throughout the game. And the first player to either get rid of all their birds or to reach 20 points is going to be the player that wins. The way the game works is that you're going to be selecting one of the birds from your supply and then placing it out on the shared stack of birds. It's not going to be much of a stack at the start of the game, but it will as the game carries forward. If no birds fall off, then that's going to be moving you up the point track, but if any birds fall off at all, then you're not going to be getting any points, and instead you're going to be taking those birds into your supply, putting you at a disadvantage. And the last game in this campaign is called Rook Requiem, and this one is another trick-taking game, but this one plays over 3 rounds, and you're going to have 12 tricks per round. The way the game works is that you're going to be determining trump and then dealing cards to all the players while also revealing a ghost card. You're going to be playing tricks following the normal trick-taking rules, which is where you have to follow suit if you're able to. Otherwise, you can play any card that you want, but if you do play a trump, then that's going to be worth more than any other suits. But there is one twist to the rules here because there is also the rook cards, and if you play those, they're going to be matching the suit of whichever card was played last. The winner takes the trick as well as a ghost card, and the cool thing about these ghost cards is that they can be positive or negative, which means that sometimes you're trying to win the trick while other times you might be trying to avoid it. Another neat thing about these cards is that they can also grant you special abilities that you'll be able to use throughout the game, so these ghost cards are going to be adding a lot of variety between rounds. And those are the games offered in the Bird series, and if you are interested to check this one out, I will have it linked down below, and you can click to get notified. And also on the 24th, we have Ice and Idols, and this one is a competitive pick up and deliver game where players are diving deep into an ice temple. Players are trying to do this in order to uncover its secrets by collecting different relics, which you'll be able to keep to either upgrade yourself with special abilities or instead to trade them in for victory points. The game offers a bunch of different characters that you can play as, each with their own special ability, and each player is going to have this player board that's going to be wrapping around your player card, and it's going to be providing you with different locations and upgrades that you'll be able to acquire if you can get the appropriate relic and slot it into that particular spot. But the important detail that I haven't mentioned yet is that the temple isn't going to be making this easy for you, because this is a temple that is constantly shifting. The relics you're trying to gain are located on a board beneath the ice, and this is all represented by 2 boards stacked on top of each other with a bunch of these acrylic pieces acting as the ice on top of them. But the ice can shift in any direction, and the entire top board can actually freely rotate from the lower board, completely changing your position if that happens to occur. And it definitely will, because every round you're going to be drawing these cards that tell you how the temple is going to behave, and this can have a bunch of different outcomes. But then the different abilities that players gain throughout the game will also give them some privileges to manipulating the board in various ways, giving you even more options to help you get to where you need to be, while also possibly preventing your opponents. But on your turn, you're going to be using action points in order to move around on the board, manipulate the board in different ways, use those special abilities, and pick up idols hidden beneath the ice. As I mentioned before, you can slot those into your player board in order to unlock new abilities, or instead you could spend them to manipulate or add cubes to your relic board, and your whole goal here is to try and create certain patterns so that you can complete these various objective cards, which will also gain you victory points at the end of the game. The player who gets the most of those victory points is the winner, and if you do want to check this one out, I will have it linked down below. Also on the 24th, we have Parks and Potions, and this one is a competitive game that plays over 5 rounds. And at the start of each round, you're going to be rolling some dice, and then each player is going to be choosing 2 of those dice in order to gain a potion of those colors. You're going to be doing this 3 times each round until each player has 6 potions. Then each player is going to be putting those out on their own personal player boards. You only have space for 6 potions, so you really want to make sure that you are spending these so that none of your potions go to waste. But the nice thing about these potions is that you can actually mix them together to create new colors, or even potions of a new shape. This is nice because combining those potions does free up more space. But the reason that you want all these potions of different shapes and colors is because there's going to be a bunch of different objective cards that players are trying to complete, and each of them is going to have some different combination of potions that it needs in order to be fulfilled. Players will be getting these cards at the beginning of each round by drafting them from the display or drawing blindly from the deck, and then the player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game, and you're going to be gaining victory points based on the amount displayed on the objective cards that you've completed. But then each card also does have a biome associated with it. You'll be able to create different sets of these biomes in order to gain additional victory points. If you want to check this one out, I will have it linked down below. This next game is also launching on the 24th, but I just found out about this one, so I don't have quite as much info on how the game actually plays. But this one is called Cerro, Gordo Silver Mines, and this is based on the actual silver mines and its history. And the way this game works is that there are 5 different characters that players can play as that all play a little bit differently from each other, but all the players are going to be contributing to a main mine, building it out and trying to collect the most silver and try to complete the most objective cards. On a turn, players will be able to place a road token as well as a building, and then you'll also be taking a mine action in order to reveal any of the special bonuses that are located under those tiles. This can often gain you silver, which will be earning you victory points at the end of the game, but you'll also be trying to complete different objectives along the way. The player with the highest sum of victory points from completing those objectives and finding that silver is the winner of the game, and if you want to learn more about this one, I will have it linked down below. Now launch on the 26th, we have Speakeasy, and this one is the next game that's coming from Vital Lacerda, and this one is a game that takes place during the Prohibition. This is a game where each player is going to be managing their own speakeasy and trying to make the most profit in order to win the game. The thing here is that you're going to be upgrading your speakeasy and making it more lavish in order to attract more customers, but the more successful you get, the more attraction you're going to gain from the police as well as rival gangs. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of info out on this game at the time of me filming this video, but this is a Lacerda game, which is very exciting, so it's no surprise that this one is also our Discord pick of the week. But a fun fact that I found while trying to find more information on this game is that Vital Lacerda himself actually considers this game in his top 5 games of all time. He does acknowledge his bias here, but I think that still does say a lot. But this is a game that looks like it's going to have a lot going on with it. There's a lot of different actions and things that you can do in the game. Aside from just building out your speakeasy, you can deliver or steal alcohol, build casinos, cook your books, and complete different objectives. There's all sorts of crates and barrels and boats and henchmen that I can't even begin to imagine how they all work together here. But one thing I can say for sure is that this is going to be a worker placement game, and it is going to feature card management. So if you do want to learn more about this one, definitely go ahead and check it out. There'll be a lot more info on the campaign once it launches, and of course you can find a link to that down below and follow along to get notified once it launches. Also on the 26th, we have Animalcatraz, and this one is a competitive game where players are playing as different convicts, and you can win the game in one of 2 ways. You can either be the first to gain enough reputation points to become the kingpin, or instead you can be the first to gather the necessary tools and equipment in order to successfully complete your escape plan. Players will be playing as different characters with different stats like strength, which you're going to be using to attack, or cunning, which you're going to be using for theft, corruption, and escaping or recruiting gangsters. The game plays over 5 rounds, and you have 5 actions per round. The players are going to be navigating through the night and day as the guards are going to be moving around the board according to dice rolls. Players are going to be using their actions to move around on the board, manage the contraband which they can carry along with them or stash in their cell, or engage in different interactions to corrupt the guards or recruit gangsters, or even trade in the black market. This is another one that I didn't get a chance to look into too deeply, so if it does sound interesting to you, definitely check it out, and I know that there are some other content creators that have covered this one, and you can go ahead and check out their videos, and I'm sure there'll be a few of them posted on the campaign page as well, but if you're looking for that, you can find a link to it in the description down below. Also launching on the 26th, we have Hedge Maze, and this one is a competitive game where each player starts the game with their own garden board, and it's going to be mostly empty at the beginning of the game, other than it being covered with a bunch of sleeping gnomes. And there's also going to be these 2 holes here that the gnomes are going to be trying to escape into as another player tries to steal them from you, because each player is going to have these 2 wizard miniatures, but these aren't going to be on your own board. Instead, they're going to be on one of your neighbors. All the gnomes are laying down because they're currently sleeping, but at the start of each game of Hedge Maze, you're going to be drawing a card for each type of gnome. And then this is going to be giving all the players certain requirements that if they're able to meet, they'll be able to wake up whichever gnome that they were able to complete that objective with. That gnome's going to be stood up, which does also allow you to spend movement points on it as if it was one of your wizards. But this is a game that plays over 10 rounds of simultaneous actions, where every round there's going to be a card drawn, and then that's going to be dictating the tile that each player has to place onto their garden board. You're going to want to place these on your board so that they cause the most trouble for your opponent's wizards that are also on your board. You can never completely block off an area on your board, but you can place these strategically to try and create long winding paths so that your opponent has to waste a lot of movement points in order to try and get where they're going to. You'll also notice that the tiles have these sigils on them, and those represent the movement points that you're going to be gaining. And for each tile that you place on your board, that's going to be gaining you 1 movement point. But for each other tile that is in the same row or column of that tile, you're going to be gaining additional movement points. You can spend those movement points on any of your wizards or any of the gnomes that you've woken up on your neighbor's board. And the nice thing about your wizards is that you can actually pick up and drop gnomes, which can come in handy because you can actually drop them on the hedges and then pick them up from the other side. So if you have one of your wizards on one side of the hedge and another one of your wizards on the opposite side, you can actually toss a gnome right over that hedge in order to try and cut a quicker path through the board. As I mentioned before, awake gnomes can also be moved by using movement points, but carrying around these gnomes is a really nice way to move those sleeping gnomes. If you're able to get any gnomes to those tunnel tiles, then you'll be able to take that gnome into your possession and put it out on your gnome home board. This is nice because for each time that you do this, you're going to be gaining the bonus token of whichever icon you're covering, which can gain you extra movements in different ways, or even spring mushrooms that allow you to jump to different areas of the board. At the end of the game, you're going to be gaining points for all the gnomes that you're able to steal from your opponent's board, but then also gaining points for any of the gnomes that you were able to prevent your other opponent from stealing from you. The player with the most points at the end of the game wins the game, and if you want to check this one out, I will have it linked down below. Also on the 27th, we have Fame and Fortune, and this one is a one versus many tactical skirmish game, and the enemy in this game can either be played by a player or by the built-in AI. But in this game, players are going to be trying to keep the evil locked away. In order to do this, they need to kill the Dragon King before the enemy player kills players at least 6 times. The Dragon King is going to be located in the middle of the board, but it's not as easy as just going there and attacking it because there's going to be 3 different runes out in play that are going to be giving it 3 layers of defense. One's going to be reducing the amount of damage that it takes, one's going to be blocking any magical attacks, and then the other is going to be regenerating health for every monster every single round. In order to deactivate these, you're going to have to be killing certain groups of monsters as they spawn out on the board. But throughout the game, players are going to be gaining different character cards, and each one of these is going to have a special ability, a speed, which dictates how far you can move for an action point, a carrying capacity, which dictates how many items you can hold, a range of how many spaces away you can hit, and then a strength, which is going to allow you to roll a certain amount of dice anytime you issue an attack. But on a turn, you have 3 actions. You can spend those on any of your characters in any combination. The only limitation here is that you can't perform the same action with the same character twice in the same turn. But the different actions allow you to move a character around on the board, use that character's special ability, or attack with that character. Once you've chosen your actions and resolved your turn, you're going to be checking the enemy's monster board to see if there are any monsters in spaces that match your player color. If there is, then that monster is going to be activating by moving its full movement amount, using its special ability, and then attacking whatever it's able to. But as players take their actions and move around the board, you'll be able to pick up different gold tokens, which you can spend to buy new characters, additional movement points, potions that can heal you or gain you different buffs, or items that can modify your stats, or even spells that offer one-time use abilities, or even additional dice. Players can also fight to gain fame, and if you acquire enough, you can actually spend it to unlock one of your more powerful abilities. The game continues like this until one side accomplishes their objective, and then they win the game, and if you want to check this one out, it will be linked down below. And we have another one here that I just found out about, so I don't have a whole lot of info on this one, but there's going to be a new expansion for the game Snow Planner, and this is the new season expansion. This one's also launching on the 27th, but it's going to be adding a bunch more content that you can mix into the game, including additional guest cards, event cards, and talent cards, as well as project cards. I did cover the original campaign back when it launched, but I also didn't have a whole lot of info on the game and how it played at that time, so if you do want to learn more about this one, I do recommend checking out the actual campaign, but I will also go ahead and roll that previous footage just to at least give you a quick overview. And this one is a competitive dice worker placement game. And in this game, players are each going to be managing their own hotel that they're going to be inviting different guests to, but then players are also going to be placing different dice workers out on a main board that's going to be representing a ski hill where your guests will be able to go out and ski on. Each round, players are going to be gaining new guests that intend to stay at that player's hotel for a number of rounds, but each round they're also going to have certain requirements that need to be met. If you're not able to meet those requirements, then those guests are going to leave early, costing you some victory points, which of course is not a good thing because whoever has the most victory points at the end of the game is going to be the one to win the game. But if you are able to fulfill the various requirements of your guests, then you're going to be able to keep them for an additional round, which is going to open up more opportunities for gaining additional victory points from the same guests, and of course stacking those on top with the additional guests that you're getting every single round. Not only that, but players will also be able to upgrade different aspects of their hotel to gain different types of benefits that they'll be able to use to further their progress in the different aspects of the game, which if you do want to know those additional aspects which if you do want to know those additional aspects of the game, you'll have to check out the Kickstarter, which I've linked down below, because that is pretty much all the information I have on this game. But if you're interested in dice work replacements, or if you're interested in the scheme theme, then this is definitely one you want to check out. And as I said, links down below. And that's everything I have for you this week, but don't leave yet because we still do have a few awesome giveaways to announce, and these are the easiest giveaways to enter ever. All you gotta do is leave a comment down below. But the first one we have is for a pledge for Railroad Tiles, and this is the next iteration on the Railroad Ink system, which already has a whole series of games and is very popular. But this takes it in a whole new direction because rather than a pad and paper, players are going to be drafting tiles from this board. There's going to be different groups of tiles, and the ones that you draft will determine your turn order for the following round, but you're going to be placing those tiles in order to make different connections and different patterns, and then also place the different cars, trains, and people in order to score even more victory points. Each pledge also includes the world expansion, which is going to add a whole bunch of different meeples and tiles and variety into the game. And that, along with the stretch goals, looks like you're going to be getting quite a lot more out of that box. And I do want to thank the publisher here because they are donating a really nice pledge, because this one is going to be the all-in collector's pledge. This is going to be coming with the collector's edition of the game, including all components offered in the Kickstarter, including all the expansions, and everything will fit in that single collector's box. This campaign is going to be offered in the UK, the EU, and North America, so if you're in any of those areas, definitely feel free to leave a comment down below with the hashtag rail. And you can say anything that you want, but if you're looking for something in specific, maybe you let us know what your favorite mode of transportation is. For myself, I actually grew up in the country, and I used to have a dirt bike, and although it's been years since I've even touched a dirt bike, I think it still remains my favorite mode of transportation, just flying through the woods in nature, hitting all sorts of dirt jumps, and just getting into mud and doing whatever. I do miss it. I doubt we'll see it in this game, but who knows, maybe they'll add a rural expansion. And the next giveaway we have is for a pledge for Ludos, the Ancient Games collection, with this one focusing on games from Africa. And this one has a collection of 4 different games that all look like a lot of fun. There's Yote, which is a game that's similar to checkers, except you're going to be putting your pieces on the board throughout the game. And then also, whenever you capture an opponent's piece, you also get to take any one of their other pieces. And then there's Oware, which is similar to Mancala, but what I really like about this one is that when you are able to get yourself in the situation where you can take all of the tokens from one of those spaces, you're then going to be cascading backwards and checking each one that you've just placed those tokens through in order to determine whether or not you can also take those. There's Dara, where you're trying to align your tokens in rows of 3, which will allow you to take any of your opponents that are not in a row of 3, but then it also protects those until you break them up again. And then finally, Fanarona, where you're going to be moving your pieces one space at a time, and then any time that you move directly towards or directly away from an adjacent opponent's piece, you'll be able to take that piece and then also any pieces that are connected behind it. Just like the title implies, all these games are ancient games from different regions in Africa. And I really like what this team is doing here because they're taking these games and then refreshing them with updated artwork and then creating this campaign in a way to preserve those games so they're not lost to time, and also to make them a little bit more available and familiar to other people around the world. In an effort to make that happen, they're offering world-friendly shipping and also a pay-what-you-want pledge. So if you are interested in this one, definitely go ahead and check out the campaign and show it some love. And another thing they would like to do is provide the rulebook in even more languages to make this even more available. So if this is something that you think you can help with and you're interested in helping out with this campaign, there is an application sheet that you can find on their campaign that you can fill out and try to get involved there. And this giveaway is going to be for the Ludos Africa Deluxe Collection, which is going to get you all the games offered in this campaign. And to enter the giveaway, all you got to do is leave a comment down below with the hashtag Africa. And you can say anything that you want, but if you're looking for something in particular, maybe you could let us know of a game that you really like from a particular region that maybe you'd like to see in an upcoming collection. The one that I'm most familiar with is an Italian game that I grew up playing all the time, but this one is more of a card game, and it is still played quite often, I think, in Italy, but this one is called Scopa. It's very similar to euchre, but in my opinion, way better because you have multiple different ways that you could score, and there's a bunch of different sets of cards that you're trying to get in order to try and get the most victory points. And I should mention that this giveaway is offered worldwide, so anyone can feel free to enter, and if you want to check out any of these campaigns, I do also put these in the description as well. And the last giveaway we have this week is for a pledge for Dungeons of the Oak Dell. And And this one is a really fun and interesting roll and write where at the start of each round you're going to be rolling dice, and then players are going to be taking turns drafting those dice, with each of those dice giving you some amount of movement and then also some amount of defense. You're going to be using that movement to move around in the dungeon and try and collect different items while also positioning yourself strategically, with each of the dungeons offering a few different levels that are indicated by the type of floor that they have, and each of those levels offering different difficulties of monsters. And what's really cool about this game is the way that you fight those monsters, because each die that you draft is also going to be associated with a different colored icon, and you're going to be able to start from that icon and then connect a line to any one of the other icons. And each time that you create a cross section that also crosses over the monster in the image, that's going to be adding that amount of damage. So if you draw a line and it crosses over two other lines that both create intersection points on the monster, then you're going to be landing 2 successful hits. There's also other icons that you can try and cross through in order to get those items added to your player sheet. There's all sorts of different items, gear, potions, and upgrades to your character and your character's health that you can get along the way. And the first player to defeat the dungeon's objective, which could be to either destroy evil shrines or kill a final boss, is the player that wins the game. And this giveaway is for the full game pledge, and since this campaign is a print and play, you're going to be getting these files within 2 weeks of the campaign ending. To enter on this giveaway, just leave a comment saying anything that you want. Just make sure to leave the hashtag dungeon in it. Good luck in the giveaways, but now let's go ahead and draw a winner from last week's giveaway, which was for a pledge of Gems of Iridescia. In order to do that, I'll use this application here, and all these extra names down here are bonus entries for my subscribers over on Ko-fi. If you do like this content and all the effort that goes into it, definitely feel free to check out my Ko-fi in the description down below. Any support really does mean a lot. It helps to make all these efforts just a little bit more sustainable. Of course, a like, subscribe, or sharing these videos is also an excellent way to help out the channel, so if you don't have too much extra money floating around, but you still want to show your support and help this channel grow, I really do just appreciate any of that. Let's go ahead and draw those comments and draw a winner. And the winner of Gems of Iridescia is Nick Marshall, who is from the Ko-fi, so thanks so much for all the support so far. I'll reach out to you and let you know that you won yourself a pretty sweet pledge here, but feel free to email me at adam@shelfclutter.com if you catch this before I reach out to you. That is everything I have for this week, and it's been a busy couple weeks trying to keep up to all these campaigns, and next month isn't looking any easier. We already have over 50 campaigns launching for October, and it's only going to go up from here, which is exciting because there's definitely going to be some really exciting games there, but then at the same time, it just makes things so busy for me that I don't get to look at all those games as much as I'd like to. There's already a bunch of games that just launched in the last 2 weeks that I haven't even had a chance to dive into. I've just been pledging $1 on anything that I'm interested in to just try and buy time, at least until the pledge manager, to make my decision and look into these things. And I would like to do another video letting you know what I've backed, so as soon as I figure all that out and get a little bit more time, that'll be the next video that I'm working on. I do also have a little bit of catching up to do on my emails and messages, so if you have reached out to me and you haven't heard anything back yet, just give me a little bit of time and I will get back to you very, very soon here. But that is everything I have for this week. Thanks so much for tuning in, and as always, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.